Greater Good Radio. Connect, learn, heal, and grow. In IFS circles, we typically hear that, I guess, in the MAPS, or at least in the beginning of MAPS, IFS is the therapy model or so on. What's the connection?
So MAPS I started in 86. It took us 5 different protocols submitted to the FDA, all rejected by the FDA. 1992, finally we can do the very first study with MDMA. The FDA changed, and that's really what's led to the psychedelic renaissance that we're in now. And then starting in 1999 and 2000, I started working with Dr. Michael Mithofer and working with PTSD. He had studied with Stan Grof in the holotropic breathwork. He'd approached me at the world's first ayahuasca conference that Ralph Metzner had organized in 2000, and we met, and he said, I'm a member of MAPS. We had a couple hundred members only, but I didn't know who he was at that time. And within a few minutes, what he said was that he wanted to talk to me about setting up an offshore clinic. He had worked in St. Kitts with Dr. Deborah Mash, who had an Ibogaine clinic. And he said, let's set up a psychedelic clinic somewhere where we could give people MDMA or LSD or something like that. And within minutes, I said, look, I'm not interested in that at all. We have to go to the heart of the system and change from the inside out. I said, let's go to the FDA. I think we can now get permission to do stuff with the FDA. He was an expert in PTSD. He had been an emergency room doctor, but he had seen some of the people come back multiple times, and he realized that he wanted to get upstream in a way to work on the mental health. So he became a psychiatrist from being an ER doctor, and he was an expert in PTSD.
This is a very accomplished person.
Extremely accomplished. And so then we started developing a protocol, trying to get permission from the FDA, which we eventually got. And so we then needed to create what's called a treatment manual that describes what is the therapy that we use with the MDMA. It's not just the MDMA. You take MDMA in an unsafe setting, or you can end up worse off. So we had to develop this treatment manual, and he had both studied holotropic breathwork with Stan, but he'd also studied IFS with Dick Schwartz. And so what he suggested is, look, I see that with MDMA, people often spontaneously talk about their parts. He said, let's just take the IFS manual, and that'll become our treatment manual. And we thought about it for a bit, but I realized that we had to customize the treatment manual for MDMA, that IFS was not explicitly giving advice to therapists on how to work with MDMA. So we needed to be very conscious about it, MDMA. And also, IFS has its own vocabulary of exiles and protectors and a whole range of different kind of concepts. And so we realized that we needed to actually create our own new treatment manual that was in part based on the work that Stan Grof had done with LSD patients in the 60s, and that had worked in the underground work with MDMA. Others had done that. So we created our own treatment manual, but it's very much the case that spontaneously under MDMA, people talk about their parts. Mm-hmm. And they do that a lot. And so Michael has actually made training videos of people spontaneously talking about their parts under the influence of MDMA, and has showed them at IFS conferences with Dick to show that just the core concepts that you've got, even if it's not the exact language he uses, but the core concepts are accurate, and they spontaneously manifest in people under the influence of psychedelics, not just MDMA. So I think it was a wise decision that we needed to create our own treatment manual to describe what we're doing. And you can use aspects of IFS during the therapy, talk to people about their parts, but it's always in response to what people come up. So we're trying to help people learn to heal themselves, to develop the skills to be their own self-soothing healer. And so we support what's emerging, this concept that there's this logic that we're not consciously aware of. So like when you had this realization of what it's like not to be loved, you can't always predict these things ahead of time, what's going to come up.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, and so what we tell people is, let's make a list of all the things that you want to deal with in your psychedelic session, and we'll talk about it in the preparation. Here's your issues. And then right before you get to take the drug, you just rip that list up and throw it away. And then whatever happens, we're going to support whatever happens. And your conscious mind may think one thing, but something else. So I think this sort of sense of this inner wisdom, so that when people start grappling with the complexities, then they are able to better identify sort of contradictory urges, and that becomes like your parts. Like this part is this part is that, or this idea of the protectors, that you're going too fast into something. So a lot of these psychological defense mechanisms have a good element in them. They are designed to protect you, but then they get overused, overstrong, and then they become harmful. But to try to find the good in them as well. So I think with IFS, it's really a very brilliant kind of understanding of what's called multiplicity, that we're not this single unified self, that there's different parts of ourselves. They bump up against each other. Some are contradictory, and you need to kind of surface all of them.
If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.